amendment, and I am utterly bewildered. Now, I know the reason, because I talked to my friends in the House of Commons. There was a time when you didn't have guillotines on constitutional bills, and this bill has been, my goodness me, has been timetabled very vigorously. There was also a time when you didn't have three-line whips or two-line whips on constitutional business. And many of the people who voted in the other place, as my noble friend pointed out, there were 25 abstentions and 20 Conservative MPs who voted against. But many of the people who went through those lobbies out of loyalty did so because they were being whipped. And they're ringing up us and saying, for goodness sake, save us in the House of Lords. Now, it's a pretty pass when the democratically elected chamber has to rely on this chamber, and that, I think, is the answer to the noble Lord Lloyd of Berwick. So I shall vote for this amendment. I do so with a heavy heart, because I think the other place should take more account of the arguments, and the executive should be more accountable, and that is the major problem which we have in our country.
My Lords, I have watched the progress of this bill over the last few weeks with increasing concern as the way in which matters affecting the Constitution of the United Kingdom are being dealt with by the present coalition government. I have to say that we read criticism of the opposition, and quite rightly so, of their lengthy and sometimes very boring speeches in this House. But I can understand why they did that. Because when we look at the Conservative benches, we find bony-faced silence on their faces. And when we look at the Liberal benches, we find faces of total embarrassment. This is a major constitutional issue, and it should not be dealt with in the way in which it is being dealt with by the government at the moment. And why is it happening? It is because they have this coalition agreement. We now have the first example of that coalition agreement. It means that Parliament does not give proper consideration to the issue before it. There's criticism of the House of Commons, the other place, not giving enough time to this debate. There was a lot of time given to the subject in our House, but in fact there was very little participation by the government benches, by the coalition benches. There was not proper debate in this House either. I am increasingly concerned at the way in which this subject is being dealt with. I understand that the leader of the Liberal Democrats, Mr. Nick Clegg, like a schoolmaster, summoned a selected number of individuals from the crossbenches within the last few days to tell them what he thinks of them. This is disgraceful, absolutely disgraceful. And for these reasons, I find myself very unhappy in supporting the government, and I will be supporting the amendment before the House.
My Lords, I know we're getting towards the end of this debate, but I just want to make one short point. I understand the argument for this threshold, which is a fear that there might be a yes vote on a very low turnout, and they wish to have this protection against it. But if that did happen, then you would be repeating what happened with the Scottish referendum in the 1970s. And I ask to remember.
Another point that has been missed, which the Minister repeated in the other place, was to say that it was the same as the Scottish referendum. The Scottish referendum was not a threshold on turnout. It was a threshold on the result. And that is why it caused such resentment. And a 40% threshold on a yes thing would, of course, be unacceptable. But the comparison is a bogus one.
I will make the point nonetheless. And I'm glad actually that the noble Lord Forsyth has given me assistance in making it. Because, in substance, yes, okay, take the point with regard to voting rather than turnout, but you are getting into the same territory, and the noble Lord Forsyth said that it caused great resentment. And would you then please, would noble lords please consider whether or not this device if it worked as they intended, would not also cause great resentment. Now, I happen to have strong views on AV, and I look forward to the campaign against it. And I wish we could get on with that instead of wasting our time on this matter.
Many of us, I believe, voted for the government out of loyalty to the government and not for the matter for which we were voting in the last round. I have listened to all the arguments today, and I am thoroughly convinced by Lord Rooker's amendment and by the speakers who have spoken, and I fully intend for the first time to vote against my government.
My Lords, we've had an absolutely scintillating debate on this particular issue.